So I ought to be grateful to Richmond and Hogarth, and indeed, whether it's my invincible optimism or not, I am grateful. Nothing could have suited me better all through those years when I was creeping about, like a rat struck on the head, and the airplanes were over London at night, and the streets dark, and no penny buns in the window. Moreover, nowhere else could we have started the Hogarth Press, whose very awkward beginning had rise in this very room, on this very green carpet. Here that strange offspring grew and throve. It ousted us from the dining room, which is now a dusty coffin, and crept all over the house.
I've walked past Hogarth House nearly every day for the past few years, and I've looked up at the blue plaque, which celebrates the Hogarth Press, and I've thought, why isn't Virginia Woolf celebrated in her own right? After all, she's a renowned woman writer and feminist icon. She was a champion of gender equality, and she helped to reinvent the novel, which had a lasting impact on modernist literature.
I've been looking at her letters and her diaries to find references to how she felt and what she did in and around Richmond.
What most people seem to know is that this was a period of mental illness, mental instability, and that she wasn't happy in Richmond. And I think that's a terribly unfair slur on Richmond, because it was a very creative period.
Accurately described, today is a fine spring day, not a hot summer one, so Leonard and I shaded it off, walking up to the park this afternoon. But Richmond on fine Saturdays is like a lime tree in full flower. Suppose one were an insect sitting on the flower. All the others swarm and buzz and burble. Being residents, we don't, of course.
I have to say it's been absolutely fascinating. For example, some of the things she talks about include going for many walks by the river. In fact, she even mentions that it's her river.
This is Virginia's Richmond, you know. She lived just a few feet away from here with her husband and had the Hogarth Press. It just makes so much sense. This place is visited by thousands and thousands of tourists and residents all the time. In the summer, people are thronging this area. Our Virginia sits here with her hat in her hand, her legs are crossed, you know, she's relaxed. She's ready to be interacted with by the public, and that's what I love.
I think the reason that a statue on the riverside is so important is because families walk along the riverside, and to try and encourage young people and children to grow up learning that this is one of the most important of England's women writers who changed the way we think about writing is terribly important to give them an early familiarity, to feel comfortable with her.
I've lived here by the river in Richmond for 50 years, and it's a very special place. I'm sure it contributed greatly to Virginia's well-being, because she lived here at a time of great turmoil in the First World War, and at a time for her of great mental stress.
I looked at a lot of pictures of Virginia, and there are pictures of her happy and smiling and laughing, and she's with friends. And, you know, this Virginia is a happy Virginia. I know that she didn't always have happy times. I really felt like it was very important. When you're making a life-size sculpture, you first have to work out what is going to be the way that people interact with the sculpture as it's sat in its location. Are people going to be able to come up to it, and what are they going to get out of it? And I felt that it was really important that it be an interactive piece. The larger one really has that feeling of, it's a nice day, I'm sitting by the river and I'm enjoying the view, I'm enjoying the moment.
The statue bears a remarkable resemblance to my great aunt, the writer Virginia Woolf. And it's rather moving because she is, in this instance, portrayed as being musing, thoughtful, and I think affectionately reflecting. And it is a wonderful idea to put it in Richmond, where she spent 10 years of her adult life with her husband, Leonard Woolf. And some lucky fellow can sit next to her and take a selfie. Why not?
If you walk along the river and have a chance to sit by Virginia Woolf, it can offer inspiration for many young people just to sit there and think and realise that actually this isn't somebody they should be frightened about, it's somebody they should be inspired by. And who knows what that'll do later on. They'll feel a closeness, they'll discover her works, and let's hope it'll encourage a generation of new writers inspired by Virginia Woolf.
James Joyce and Virginia Woolf are often quoted together as the first great modernist authors to use the literary technique of the stream of consciousness. Joyce got there first in 1922 with his magnificent Ulysses, but Virginia Woolf was hard on his heels in 1925 with Mrs. Dalloway, and a few years later with To the Lighthouse. Joyce has a statue in Dublin, and I feel it's high time Virginia Woolf has one here, for an important reason we've heard about, the Hogarth Press. Virginia Woolf's link with Richmond survives just a few hundred yards away from here. It's Hogarth House, where she and her husband, Leonard Woolf, lived from 1915 to 1924. In 1919, they began the very influential Hogarth Press. In its first 5 years, apart from Virginia herself, its authors included E.M. Forster, Catherine Mansfield, and T.S. Eliot. It was in 1922 that they published the first UK edition in book form of T.S. Eliot's The Waste Land. It was printed in 450 copies, hand-set by Virginia herself in the traditional manner, which is rather a special local event.
I've sat over this fire many an evening, talking, and save for one fit of the glooms last summer, have never complained of Richmond, till I shed it like a loose skin. I've had some very curious visions in this room too, lying in bed, mad, and seeing the sunlight quivering like gold water on the wall. I've heard the voices of the dead here, and felt, through it all, exquisitely happy. Many times she talks about how much she loved Richmond and how much she loved living in Hogarth House. In her diary she mentioned, "Nor at the moment can I think of any farewell for this beautiful and lovable house, which has done us a good turn for almost precisely 9 years, so that, as I lay in bed last night, I nearly humanised it and offered it my thanks."
The important thing is to celebrate one of the best known English writers who is also a woman. Let's celebrate Virginia Woolf in Richmond.
Help us to raise the funding we need to make this fantastic project a reality. We need to raise £50,000 to create a life-size bronze statue for Richmond. Help us to commemorate Virginia Woolf's life here, so that people can sit next to Virginia on the riverside and just imagine.